So much had changed, and yet, as Joe Miller placed the ball in the penalty spot, thousands at the other end of the ground could have been forgiven for feeling that nothing had. With only 7 minutes remaining of a game that Rangers had dominated for so long, Celtic had a chance to equalise and continue their long, unbeaten Old Firm run at home. It was Richard Gough, on his way to becoming Scotland's Player of the Year, who presented them with the opportunity as his outstretched hand made contact with a ball that had bobbled wildly on the parkhead surface all afternoon. The jinx, one of a few that are strangely superstitious, Graham Souness lamented in the diary that he kept that season, looked certain to provide the chasing pack with a slip that they had expected. Second place Aberdeen were best suited to take advantage. 4 points behind on that morning, a defeat of fellow chasers Dundee United at Pittodrie would surely bring them back into contention, what with the Rangers' record in the East End being as poor as it was. Miller's penalty, however, like Celtic's title defence that season, was weak and devoid of the necessary energy and belief. Chris Wood stopped it, and Gary Stevens was quickest to clear the danger completely. The last chance to catch Rangers had been snuffed out. Frontrunners from the start, it was a display of power and prowess that set it apart from the first 2 seasons of the Souness era. There was no long, chaotic game of catch-up following a shambolic start, and, although significant injury would strike again, it was now a squad with the depth that could absorb the blows and respond strongly. This was a season that resonated far beyond the one footballing calendar. On and off the pitch, the pace of modernisation at Ibrox outstripped Scottish football by some distance, which in turn would create a chasm that had not been seen in the country for a generation. Rangers landed big victories in 80-89, both in terms of margin and importance, that acted as a bellwether for the impending new decade. During those first 2 years, questions persisted about Souness's long-term commitment, the hunger of English mercenaries to bounce back from setbacks, and the impact that the wild temperament within the squad had on consistency. By the end of this third season, that noise had subsided to silence. This season is a tale of transition, from an inconsistent and immature impertinence to a more measured and balanced footballing team that was now playing for keeps. The campaign would have setbacks, as would those that had followed, but by its conclusion, all of Scottish football had started to realise that it would now take more than a few bad results to knock Rangers off course in achieving their number one aim. Before the 1st of April 1989, Rangers hadn't beat Celtic away from home in 9 years. After that day, 12 years would pass before they would fail to go through a season without such a victory again. Before winning the league in 1989, Rangers had retained the league championship only 3 times in the previous 40 years. By the time they next lost out, there would be teenage fans literally unable to recall how that once felt. What was exceptional would soon be customary. The transformation from rarity to routine, far from being flaky and unreliable, Rangers were now becoming a machine. Here to discuss just how that happened is Andy McGowan. Good evening, Andy.
Hello, Martyn. Hello, John. Hello, listeners.
And as Andy's told you, John Cowden's always here from Greece. How are you doing, John?
I'm fine. Good evening, everyone. And to those listeners who thought the last show was a bit short, as the song went on the 5-1 game, we won 7 tonight. So could be a long one.
Well, we'll just see how it takes us. We're over that bump, or that titleless bump in this series, and we're going to start, of course, the first of 9 consecutive titles in a row. I want to take you, gentlemen, to Northern Tuscany, high up in the hills, the Living Mountain it's called, a 600-hectare-long vista, full of olive groves, vineyards, picturesque villages, and it has a resort there, a sprawling network of hotels and chalets, restaurants, sports facilities, 3,600 feet above sea level. It's called Il Choco, the log, the oak tree, and this was the base that the Graham Souness chose to launch this championship fight back, guys. The players had 3 days of running to and from Bellahouston Park from Ibrox, and then they were given beautiful weather and food in exchange for 10 days of the most punishing pre-season training that any of them could remember. 3 sessions every day, morning, noon and night, focusing on ball work, stamina, providing the kind of modern professional framework that had simply been missing badly the year before. Terry Butcher said, by the evening we were too tired to do anything else other than have dinner. Even if we went to the bar, it was for water, because we were there for one reason only, to get fit. The impact of this work at altitude was felt on the way home, which came via a full health and technical assessment at Lilleshall. most of the players raving about how fit they now felt. Il Choco borders the Garfagnana, the green lung of Tuscany, and it was a trip, gents, that would breathe new life into this Rangers revolution. And this trip to do pre-season training in Italy, which was becoming now the heart of modern football, seems a wee bit different from Bellhouston Park and then a tour of West Germany or Switzerland playing some local village teams or whatever. This felt like a gear change.
It was another signal of intent. We'd went from the first pictures of Souness in a Rangers training jersey at Jordan Hill to this, which was, as hard as it is to believe in this modern day era of sports science to the nth degree, this was something fairly special to go and have a high altitude camp. Basically, you used to read about Italian teams doing this, Spanish teams doing this, taking their players away and isolating them for weeks on end in training camps. And this was as close as we'd ever been to that kind of scenario. And, we used to devour the Rangers news at this point in time and see pictures of these lush green pitches, the players all nicely tanned, the shorts rolled up to above their thighs.
Yeah.
And it gave you an insight into, this was kind of the embodiment as soon as his original, importation of Italian methodology and professionalism, and it was starting to show at Rangers. So it was something different.
John, Il Choco would become the base Rangers would use for some years. Did it register that difference, or was it just a change of scene? Because we had been to West Germany, I'd been to Switzerland. Foreign camps were nothing new, but again, the players really did rave about this camp in a way that they complete opposite to their dissatisfaction from the previous season.
It's different. It's only in hindsight it seems more different. I think the big thing that you'd noticed by then was the lack of games against, the local team of barmen and waiters, which seemed to be obligatory. You'd play 3 games against them, and then you'd play a Bundesliga team or somebody from the Swiss. The fact was that they were away for 10 days, and yeah, you get in the Rangers news, everything that was happening. Look how hard we're training. Does the Rangers news ever say anything at that point, any season?
Yeah.
I think the fact is, hindsight shows it was right. But the big thing was we weren't playing lots of games, which was very unusual. For, as you said, when you go to Switzerland or Germany, you're playing amateur teams, or even Sweden, you're playing. Here it was all about work. Now, how hard they're working, you don't know until they come back. I suspect there was also a drive between, shall we say, Rangers supporters in the team. McCoy's, Durant Britt, who were pig sick at the Tims winning the previous, and also the imports who had a real winner's mentality, probably led by Butcher, who are like, last season isn't going to happen again. And I think there was a common purpose or mentality within the squad that I don't buy into Souness's thing about, we've won one, they've won one. I think when you look at the two squads, it's do we want to win it? And the things are better in place. Souness is more relaxed. You see it pre-season and you see it all through the season. Yeah. He's a man at ease with himself in 88, 89 in a strange way compared to
completely different
criticism. Yeah, compared to even the winners of 86, 87 and the disaster in 87, 88, shall we say, which didn't go so well. This year he is a much calmer man. He looks relaxed. He looks tanned. He's strolling about as if he's got a Liverpool jersey on. This isn't the chaos or the what would you call it, the force of nature of the first 2 seasons.
And I mean the big difference between the Il Choco camp, the tours that they would go on, you've mentioned it. You're mixing up days training with games. I think they might have had one game and asked a team to come in and play, but it was just this obsession with fitness and technical drills and just that focus while they were away. Once they came back, there was lots of Scottish pre-season games planned, but that came after the work was done. But obviously, as we discussed at length through 4 shows, something had to change in order to get this thing back on track. While the players were in Italy, the club's annual report was released, and the message from the chairman, David Holmes, I think he was drawing a line that would be visible from space. He called last season traumatic. He said has always been an honour to pull on the blue shirt of Rangers. There follows from that certain responsibilities to maintain the high standards of the club, both on and off the field. If a player's on or off-field behaviour brings the club into disrepute, he becomes a liability. If a player cannot accept the discipline imposed by an officer of the club, then he cannot stay with us. Again, a clear line. Souness on board with that. There'd be no continuation of that debilitating inconsistency and turmoil. Souness says the only team who can stop us regaining the title are ourselves. Celtic are still basking in the glory of their centenary success, but I can assure you that all that we intend to make their joy as short-lived as possible, which of course he would do. Privately, now this season, I'm looking at it right there on my shelf, Graham Souness, A Manager's Diary. He kept and published a diary from the summer to the next summer, 1989, which would obviously include quite a momentous event as well. It's interesting in its insight, but he has a bit of apprehension before meeting up, beginning to wonder what the season will hold for us. Are the players going to be up for it? Also noticing that David Holmes is maybe slightly different. He's maybe lost some of his enthusiasm. During my first season, he was a tower of strength to myself and Walter. Maybe he's now had enough. He took an absolute buffeting on all sides last season. Perhaps that explains why he's not quite as bouncy as before. Well, we would soon see and find out why that was maybe the case. In terms of transfer activity, guys, the traditional, by then, summer dance to land Mark Hateley ended quickly this time. Hateley was keen, Monaco were not. That was over. So soon as, because he had to have a target man, of course, went for Kevin Drinko, Andy, from Norwich City. They were keen to bring him in the season before, but Norwich City were in a bit of a relegation dogfight, wouldn't let him go, and his goals kept him up. 500 grand, beating off Manchester United and Spurs. So again, this was not some kind of, a lower reaches of the English First Division. This was someone who was wanted by some of the biggest clubs in England. And again, an example that Alex Ferguson at this point does not have the pulling power when it comes to the transfer market that some may reverse engineering assume that he would have if he'd taken up the Rangers job. 6 foot tall, loads of power. He proved very popular in his season here. Your memories of that signing?
Kevin Drinko was an exciting signing, and that you were going back into the English market and plucking a hot, not so much a prospect because you're fairly mature by that point, but you're plucking one of the hot stars for England. My memory of him was he was extremely powerful, he was robust, could play with his back to goal. Not quite Mark Hughes, but kind of the same kind of way of playing. Extremely good in the air, great attacker of the ball in the air. And, the Hateley thing was well known by then. Every summer we were linked to him. I think this was the second or third summer, maybe.
Third.
And it was just this kind of constant striving for the perfect target man that Souness wanted as foil for another, usually McCoist. And Drinko came in and he hit the ground running. I had great memories of him. It really, I think it was maybe one season for him at Rangers, and then obviously the season after things changed with the arrival of Mo Johnson, Esquire. But I think he finished up top goal scorer for us this season, didn't he?
Yeah. No, he had a great time. John, in terms of transfer activity, clearly the big issue was at the back. Graham Roberts wasn't away yet. He would only leave for Chelsea on August 7th. So still a bit of work to do there, but clearly he was on the way. Souness's original plan was to move Richard Gough back to right back, where he'd come, and get a central defender in. Mark Wright was the big target. There was a bid for him at Derby County that was rejected. Rangers were linked with a promising young centre half from Middlesbrough called Gary Pallister, which kind of came to nothing. But yeah, that plan was find a centre half until it became known that the best right back in the country was unsettled and fancied a move, and Rangers could maybe do that bit of business, which they did, of course, for Gary Stevens from Everton for £1 million. Souness loved him. He felt he'd be consistent, and Souness wanted consistency. He's the ideal modern defender, quick, athletic, strong. He gets tight on an opponent, he can get across the cover, and he's the best at reading a situation. If someone did get past him, Souness said he was sure that he had the pace to get back at them. That energy, that fitness, Stevens was by far the best player on the post-Italy beep test. Would provide Souness with that reliability that he wanted. Gary Stevens missed one game throughout the entire season. I want to ask about the impact of Stevens joined, not in a detached way, because he's not as big a signing in and of himself as Butcher was, but it's more the cumulative impact of this signing. Jesus, another £1 million signing, another England international. They had a horrible European Championships, but Gary Stevens started every game in West Germany. He was the established right back there. It's just more, and this kind of cumulative build that had started really with Richard Gough in the October of '87, and we the three of us talked about that winter spending spree from the previous season, but it's just more layers of quality rather than the kind of impact of a single player in and of himself. Is that a fair assessment of the impact of the Stevens signing?
I think it is. Well, we had actually done most of our signings for 88, 89 in hindsight through the winter 87, 88. And a lot of those ones, I wouldn't say didn't perform, but the season didn't pan out exactly as we thought, do come into their own at the beginning of this season. Wilkins, Ian Ferguson, Mark Walters. I'm not saying they didn't contribute the previous season, but they didn't have a pre-season, didn't hit the ground running, etc. And there were so many of them. And as you say, that I think everybody expected Gough, who pretty much was a right back apart from his year at Spurs, because that's where he played at Dundee United, and he was this galloping up and down. And there was all these other right, and then Gary Stevens come in, and for people of my vintage and maybe older, I think the initial impression, and I don't think it'll have changed, is he is the successor to Sandy Jardine in terms of fitness, a kind of quiet calm about him. He's not lunging into big tackles and beating his chest the way Butcher was, a la John Gregg or whatever. He's a football playing right back who, if you beat him or get past him, his pace is going to get you there. But suddenly you're then looking at our defence, our team actually, but you look at our defence and you're going, Woods in goal, Gary Stevens, Richard Gough, Terry Butcher, and then Browner, Monroe. And left back's probably our weakest position in relative terms. And it's another player who is an England current international who chooses to come to us, reinforcing that we are the kings of the United Kingdom football scene. There is nobody can touch us. If we want our man, generally we get him, or it's for other reasons than anything else. These guys aren't going to Man U or anything else, and Everton are a brilliant team at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, they have won the league. They were the coming team and would have won the European Cup if Liverpool hadn't, caused all English teams to go out. And it's just fantastic. I think the Hateley one I was getting kind of sick. It was either sign for us or beat it. I mean, 3 seasons in a row, not many people actually, after knocking his back or not panning out that length of time. But Gary Stevens is classy. He really is. He's not. We were always labelled with being a physical team, but you look at our team at that point, footballing wise, it's sensational.
Well, this
can't
is
accuse.
Yeah.
I mean, we just are a brilliant football team from back to front.
Yeah, and this is something over the next 4 shows that if I do nothing else, I want to get a bit of love for the quality, the actual technical quality of this team, because I think Souness has made a change. We the three of us talked to think about this need to win the fight first and stop being the punch bags, the laughing stock of Scottish football, overly aggressive, all the red cards mounting up. The disciplinary record from here until Souness starts to crack up really before he leaves in 1991, is actually very good. There's a control about Rangers now, but there's a balance and a genuine footballing balance about this team. It is one of the most underrated sides of the era. Andy, that's £7 million Rangers have spent. £7 million in 2 years from 1986 to 1988. As John said, the 5 mid-season signings from last year are bedded in. You've got Derek Ferguson and Ali McCoist tied up on new long-term deals. This is a squad of just great quality and stability. You get the best goalkeeper in Britain, their best right back in Britain, 2 very good central defenders, 3 very promising young Scottish midfielders, a winger who would end up in the World Soccer top 20 players of 1988, and of course, Scotland's sharpest striker. And we talked 4 shows ago about Souness's irritability, his defensive nature when he was interviewed on the eve of 87-88 about the chances of Rangers winning everything, and he didn't enjoy that question because he knew he had not had a good summer. Completely different man. He's comfortable, he's relaxed. He said Rangers will be going all out to win everything we enter. That's the way it has to be at this club. For all that pain, Andy, of the close of 87-88, Celtic winning the double, farce after chaos, this just really did seem like the slate wiped clean and Rangers absolutely all guns blazing to go again.
So John's captured the signing of Gary Stevens perfectly. It was a massive signing for us because he was the best right back in Britain, signed for Everton, a major preeminent English club at that point in time, and our squad was really, really strong, and the evolution was starting to take pace. We've had the first couple of seasons where we kind of had a false start the year before because Celtic had, whatever happened in their centenary year, they managed to make it work for them. But we always knew that this juggernaut wasn't going to be derailed. It was always a case of getting back on course. And the thing that was happening here was that it was in the ascension. The squad was getting better and better. It still wasn't where it needed to be. And to go back to Drinkle, Drinkle was a great striker for us that season, but he wasn't quite where we needed to be for Europe, right? So there was this kind of middle ground we were at, where we were becoming an extremely good team for Scotland, quite rightly looking to win everything. But, still that wee bit short. John, again, correctly identified the left-back slot was still something that we were always linked with. If you remember Martyn, Stuart Pearce, Tony DeRigo, every left-back gone, we were always linked to them because, we were in the market for everybody and anybody. So it is an underrated, probably in hindsight, team. It doesn't get the love it deserves. You've still got likes of Davy Cooper in there, You've got Ray Wilkins, we spoke about in the last show, we touched upon his arrival. You've got moments of genius for Ian McCall, for God's sake. There's loads of stuff in that squad that was really, really good to watch and enjoyable as a Rangers fan.
Indeed there was. For all these new arrivals though, pre-season, there was only one man people wanted to see back in a Rangers jersey, and that was of course Terry Butcher. His return would be difficult to catch. There was an SFA ruling at the time that prohibited fans from attending any game before the 30th of July. Rangers played Queen's Park at Lesser Hampden. Without fans, it was behind closed doors, but there were some peeping over the walls and the gates. Either of you tried to get a glimpse of Terry Butcher back in the fold that afternoon?
No.
I was every pre-season friendly, but no. Climbing up to look over the corrugated iron fences at Lesser Hampden on a Saturday afternoon, I could wait 48 hours or whatever it was.
You probably could. And it's probably testament to Butcher's reputation and the confidence that he would be back. Rangers knocked back £1 million bid for him that week from Manchester United. United had tried to sign him actually the week before the leg break as well. So there's just a faith in that recovery. He's going to be back, and he did. The friendlies, Kilmarnock, Raith Rovers, Ayr United, Clydebank, well used, well chosen. It was just a better programmed plan. The glamour showpiece, they call it, friendly was, of course, at Ibrox. It was supposed to be against Monaco, who had to pull out. Ironically, Rangers were showcasing a new Monaco-inspired away strip. But it was Bordeaux, runners-up to Monaco in Ligue 1 the season before, who had agreed to provide the opposition for Davy Cooper's testimonial. Rangers won 3-1, huge crowd sellout, people locked out, again, with all due respect, probably not to see Jean Tigana and Clive Allen, Enzo Schifo, as good as they were. They were here to pay respects to Cooper, a great Ranger, someone who obviously played so long at the club. Relationship with the fans was up and down, I think it's probably fair to say, over that career, but by this point there was a genuine appreciation. I was there that night. It was a lovely evening. First follow I think was ever sold on the streets that night. Andy, any memories of this and the homage to Cooper?
I was there as well. Beautiful night. I can remember the sun coming through in between the main stand and the Broomland, shining onto the tunnel as the team emerged. That brilliant strip. And what I do remember was the absolute frenzy for tickets for that night. The demand was absolutely incredible for what was essentially a friendly. And it was just a case of, people wanted to pay tribute, as you say, to David Cooper. And I personally always thought that it was great to see that Cooper remained here for the Souness Revolution and was able to actually play in a team worthy of him himself. So, a great night, and I remember the Bordeaux goalie, Dominique Dropsy. What a name.
3-1 Rangers won. Butcher scored, as did Kevin Drinkle, and of course McCoy's with a beautiful third. John, you said you were at all pre-season games. Any memories of that night? It did feel different. I mean, I know we're all, even now, people are keen to get back, see what, new signings, new strips, and sometimes a glamorous opponent. But there was something different about that night, was there not?
Was it for a pre-season glamour friendly? We seemed to play quite well. We didn't get played off the park, and we won, which wasn't always the case.
Compared with
Munich.
It
was a glorious night. It was a glorious night. I think it wasn't just the team. I think the support were champing at the bit after 87, 88. In hindsight, I don't think it was that bad a season because of where we got in Europe and in comparison to what went previously. But there was a feeling of they had ran their luck to the nth degree the previous season, and we'd Butcher breaking his leg, whatever. We were desperate. We knew we were the best team. We had the best team. We had the best players. We were the biggest. And I think it was like we've had to listen to this lot all summer. We've had to listen to them going about the Republic of Ireland, beating England, going so far. Thank goodness for Wim Kieft. And I think there just is a thing of, right, Butcher's back, got all these new players, playing against Bordeaux, and it was a lovely game of football from what I can remember. For a pre-season friendly, there was a slightly higher momentum to it. I just felt probably us and the players and everybody was like, let's just bring on this season. We're ready to go, and just let us at everybody. And that might be hindsight because of what happens in the first few games. But I just recall everybody was up for it. It was like, okay, they had their birthday celebrations. Right, now's the time to really put them in place.
And that transition from pre-season to the proper stuff was seamless. From that Gary Stevens goal at Douglas Park against Hamilton Accies in the opening day, famously, of course, the first goal of 9 in a row, Rangers ripped through the opening 8 league games, dropping only 1 point along the way. The 2-0 win over Accies, matched by the kind of expected wins against St Mirren and Dundee at home, but also 3 away wins at Motherwell, Hearts, Dundee United. Traditionally difficult, at least awkward trips, showed an early resolve in this Rangers side, coupled with, in the case of that 1-0 win up at Tannadice, some excellent football. That was an Ian Ferguson header, just 7 minutes from time to give Rangers the win, the least that Rangers deserved on the night. Jim McLean had to say there was only one team on the park. Rangers were miles ahead, and I thought tactically brilliant. Any memories of that Tannadice game, gents, midweek?
Yep.
I have no recollection.
I was on the telly that night. For some reason, when the goal goes in, I'm wearing a yellow jumper. I have no idea why I was wearing a yellow jumper. It must have been quite cold. And you can see my fist pump in the air. I remember it going, it was that back post into, and it was to the left of the goal. And we were riding on a crest of wave by this point. We were clicking on every level, it felt like. The results, apart from one obvious one, don't look sensational, but I never felt we were really that much in trouble in any game, which is unusual for us at the start of the season. It's almost unheard of, let's face it. It's us, we are so slow starters. But at this point, we're 9 points ahead of Celtic. I looked up, after 8 games, we're 9 points ahead of Celtic.
Yeah.
I mean, we blow them out the park in a way that the only other season I can remember doing it with an Old Firm win at the beginning, which destroys them, is 77-78. We're flying. We are, the world is our oyster. Everything we could have hoped for at the beginning is suddenly just opening up. It's not as if, I think McCoist has an injury at one point, maybe Drinkle might have. It's all seamless though.
Yeah.
And we're playing lovely football. As you say, there's a calm, a composure. Wilkins is pulling a lot of strings, it feels like. Walters is... I mean, we just have the best players. Yeah. I mean, we have a sensational squad. And you said you want to show the love. How, over these 3 seasons, maybe we don't go further than Euro is probably the only disappointment. Yeah. Because this is one of the best squads and one of the best teams we have had in the past 40, 50 years.
I mean, I'd Gascoigne and Laudrup to that. You're winning the European Cup.
Yes.
I think.
Absolutely.
But anyway, for this season, for the first time under Souness, no messing about, no fumbling about at the start of the starting line. And although this run, I think the best Rangers had enjoyed since 74-75, had its roots in Tuscany, it was jet propelled by one famous afternoon in Govan.
Dangerous moment though, the ball coming across goal for Butcher's header. That's off the post, there's McAvenny! Ray Wilkins will take the free kick. Goff is in the box once again. So is Butcher. Back to Brown. Blocked by McCarthy, there's McCoist! Goff and Butcher have gone up. It's launched in field by Stevens, there's Butcher. Back with Wilkins. Absolutely magnificent from Ray Wilkins. Well, a goal made in England. The throw from Gary Stevens. The header on from Terry Butcher. The stunning volley from Wilkins. And Andrews scarcely moved. Here's Durant retrieving it for Rangers. McCoist nods it on, an awkward one for Andrews. And the ball is in the net. It's a goal for Rangers. McCoist to Walters. Walters now facing McCarthy. Putting in a fine cross. Kevin Drinkle. Walters to Drinkle. It's 4-1 to Rangers. It was great play from Walters, finding room for the cross. There was Drinkle powering the header against the balance of Andrews into the top corner. And it's 4-1 to Rangers. White judging the fight well. On Brown. Aiken in trouble as Ali McCoist. Down he goes this time, but Walters! Mark Walters makes it 5.
Right, gentlemen, shall we enjoy? There is a time capsule on this, the very first time capsule on the 5-1 game in August 88. The thing that should be mentioned first, and it's no coincidence that you get a result in a performance like this, Andy. Souness had near enough a full squad with which to choose. Only Monroe was injured, and John Brown's coming in there. I don't think Souness would be too bothered by that. Billy McNeil not quite enjoying the same kind of fortunes. Speculation about Frank McAvenny returning to London, kind of dominating the press conferences. We've said this before on shows, but McNeil's prescient accuracy the day before the game when he said there is as much chance of McAvenny moving as there is of Rangers beating us 5-1 tomorrow was obviously superb. Pat Bonner's injured, Alan McKnight was sold, so his big concern, who's he going to throw in for the Old Firm goalkeeping debut? He had Alan Ruff, experience but never played, or his new signing, 250 grand from Leicester City, Ian Andrews. He would go with Andrews. Andrews said, I've not seen very much of Rangers, but that doesn't worry me. If we do our job properly, we'll beat them. I know nerves will come into it at some point. It all helps to keep you on your toes. By the time the teams lined up, I think things had changed for Andrews. Butcher said, I looked at him and saw his eyes were glazed. I turned to Woodsy and told him his opposite number was all over the place and we would win this one. Well, we certainly did, Andy. Before we talk about the game, again, it's just this show of strength and power. There's no dramas here, no suspensions and big injuries. It's pretty much a Rangers team at full throttle.
It's an iconic game, and I think the perspective that should be noted here, especially for younger listeners, is that 5-1, big victories of that margin just didn't happen in Old Firm games. They hadn't happened for a long time. You'll probably know better than me, Martyn, the exact data. So a victory of that magnitude was huge, absolutely huge. That was a tanking. It's a tanking any day of the week, but at this point in time, for an Old Firm game, it was unheard of to see one half of them, be so dominant in a game. And, it changed everything for us. I don't think it's any exaggeration. I don't think it's any coincidence it was the first game you selected for a time capsule, because it changed everything for us. And that, not just that season, but in terms of mindset, it pushed Celtic way back in terms of what they'd achieved last year. It was forgotten completely. And it was a show of strength. It was. We had all our new signings out. The guys we'd signed the previous season, like Walters, had bedded in completely. And then you had the likes of Wilkins added to the mix. A great blend, because you've got Brown, people like that knew what it was all about. McCoy's was still in the team. And it was just a great victory because, I don't know, was it 5 minutes into the game, McAvenny scores? And it's piss and doing, it's blustery, they score, and you're like, oh no, here we go. And then it all changed. The sun started shining the righteous.
Indeed it did. Only 3 times in the previous 40 Old Firm games had there been a margin of 3 goals. So you're absolutely right. This wasn't the norm. John, can you remember? We'll get into the bit of the detail and enjoy that. But the pre-match stuff, you've got the football and contest atmosphere. Rangers bit between their teeth, want the title back. Celtic coming there as newly crowned champions, double winners. Early on the season, only week 3, but the political tensions were there. It's absolutely undeniable. There's an IRA campaign of violence kind of reaching its crescendo. 7 British soldiers were killed by a bomb attack on the bus, and if former players on the after dinner circuit are to be believed, it was kind of opportunistically included in Souness's team talk, given that you've got a starting 11 that contains 6 Englishmen. Very much that's what they represent, and pointing to the picture of the Queen, etc. This is what we represent, and this is bigger than just football. Do you remember much about the kind of frisson or kind of electricity before the game even started?
I don't think it was as exceptional as what was described. It was excellent. It was akin to where it was 2 years before in '86, so on different levels. The first one when Durant scores the winner. I think there's an expectation, or a hope, but an expectation we're going to do it. The result, there is no expectation of what transpires. And there is probably in the '80s, this is all the violence is bubbling up again. But if you were kicking about in the '70s, actually, there was a lot of it going about then. So there was always an edge at All-Seater Stadium compared to the '70s. But there's a general buzz because of I wouldn't even say just the political, but because of how we're playing, how we're set up. There's debts to be repaid from the previous season, and we're looking good. It's normally, trying to remember the last, even after this, when we go into a first Old Firm game without having at least 1 or 2 defeats behind us, and we're playing catch up. Now we're going in, I think we're point off top maybe because we get 3 points out of 4, but we're near the top of the table. Very unusual. We're sort of cruising along. No suspensions, no injuries. Again, very unusual. It's very idyllic in terms of the preparation and the build-up. And there just is a hunger. You just sense it. I think even Ireland beating England, and you've got to remember they had Bonner, Morris, McCarthy are all in that Irish team. And we have all this English, and it is a sort of that sort of build-up. And I think there is a few dates both on a national and club level, and maybe Souness takes into a sort of, shall we say, pseudo-political level. But there doesn't need much oil poured in those fires. In fact, in hindsight, it is remarkable how calm we were and how focused.
Well,
because if that had been the previous season he made that speech, we'd have ended up with 8 men.
Well, we know the story of that, of course, with the 2-2. But you're absolutely right. It would have there'd be echoes of this, I think, in '99.
Yes,
with the visit of the Rangers to Parkhead to win the title, and a laser focus on the football only. Folk falling at the stands, Celtic players losing their heads, red cards, whatever. Don't care. It's no provocation, no retaliation, do the job, you're better than them. And this is not a dirty game. There are a few challenges early on for sure, but it's an Old Firm game. But it's not remarkably filthy. It is just a football and evisceration. Andy, you're right, doesn't quite start like that with McAvenny's goal. McCoist's equaliser though, and these are both good strikes by opportunistic and very alert strikers. Terrible defending, both of them. The wind is up. Chris Woods notices this in the build-up, and it comes in the first half. Sorry, and he says at half-time, "Look, that was hard out there at our end. You maybe want to send a few up and unders for their new goalie in the second half, but we'll get to that in a minute." McCoist's reaction to his equaliser. Now, McCoist, that smiling assassin, the happy-go-lucky guy, the joy in scoring goals. McCoist looks fucking furious when he scores. I mean, there is just this edge to this Rangers approach, and the kind of focus that they have, that we are not losing this game, we're not drawing this game, we're going to win it, and we're going to win by some margin. And that celebration, I think, is in contrast to the Wilkins one, which is pure joy. You have Rangers players just laughing at just what they've seen from that strike. Your memories of those 2 goals, Andy?
Yeah, you don't do what McCoist did in the game without a bit of steel behind the Laffy Jokey alley, but you didn't really see it often. He certainly did that day, and it probably speaks back to what you were saying about what was said in the dressing room and the kind of the drive and the belief that was instilled in them before they went out in the park. The goal for Wilkins, on the other hand, is just, I mean, if you say to me, right, you've got to watch one goal on a loop for the rest of your life on your eyeballs, some kind of orange torture, that would be the one that I'd watch, because it's just poetry. It's just absolutely beautiful, the way he just catches that ball and the way it hits the back of the net. It's just beyond belief to do that in an Old Firm game. And even the commentary, which, you know, the goal made in England, and the way that Wilkins wheels away with that look in his face, that was where, I mean, we love Wilkins even as early as that, but that's why he's held as such high regard by Rangers fans, because you don't get to deliver moments like that often in your career to fans and be taken to your heart in an instant. It was a fantastic goal, and it just went uphill for there, didn't it?
Yeah, it really did. Just a wee note on Wilkins, and look, Souness' use of the market, we'll get into this maybe in a later episode. One of the laziest jibes with he's a checkbook manager. I could win what he wins with Rangers with that kind of money. Plenty of examples in football of high spending failures. You have to spend it well, and he did. He had control, by the way, complete control of how he spent his money, or Rangers' money. But he'd be very good at short-term deals. Clearly, he would buy some players that we've spoken about over the last year that would, stand the test of time at Rangers. But in those short-term, Wilkins was only there for 2 years, but he was just beloved. Now this helps, of course, but as I said before, he got us, and we certainly got him. Tommy Burns injured at half-time. Billy McNeil replaces him with a defender instead of the more attacking kind of Joe Miller option, I guess, to try and dig in, keep it at 2-1. But any plans were left in tatters pretty quickly. Ian Andrews can't deal with that looping ball in the air with the wind that Chris Woods had discussed at half time. Kevin Drinkle cements his early status with the Rangers fans with what I can only legally describe, there's no other way of doing it, as a bullet header into that top right hand corner. Walters then sweeps up to make it 5 with half an hour ago, just under half an hour to go. It would have been a penalty anyway. John, and I want both of you to just try and explain, because Andy said, I've backed it up with the stats, this doesn't happen. Old Firm games are torturous, they are nervy, they are tense, they're close. That feeling of we could win this at half time, to we are going to win this at 3-1, to Jesus, what is happening here, how much and how many can we actually get? The floodgates were open, John. How did that feel?
Yeah, as you say, even the ones you described before, I think you need to go back to probably about 74, 75 New Year one, which was actually a meaningful 3-0 demolition. We had a couple in between and they'd won, but they were nothing games. It wasn't title run-ins or anything. I mean, you're going back to the 60s for both teams, actually. And Scottish Cup final 69, I guess. January 66 when they're dancing about in trainers. I think it'd be August 60 was the last time we did it. And at 2-1 at half time, you're thinking, just hold it. You want to win. And if it gets 3-1, you breathe a bit easier, but just win. Because we were better in the first half, but we weren't walking all over the top of them, I didn't feel. They could, with McAvaney, who was a really good player. I mean, for all these shenanigans or whatever, he was a cracking striker. Yeah. I mean, he really was. And he scored this goal out of nothing in many ways, when it comes back off. It's a finisher's goal the way McCoist was. So you're thinking, and then the only goal you can fault Andrews for is that third one. I don't think he's to blame for any of the 4, because they're all excellent goals. Goes to 4, and we should have had a penalty before 4 when I think White brings down Walters in the box. And it goes to, and they're punch drunk. It's quite fascinating watching the game just around that 4th goal. Their legs have gone. It's like a boxer who's taken one too many to the chip, and they're not even grimming on for whole life. We seem to be 3, 4, 5 yards ahead of them, and they're running in concrete boots. And we're still buzzing after the 4th up, and it's chaos away. Aitken brings it down, gives away a penalty, takes out his own man, and then Walters puts it in. And at that point, you're thinking this could be 10. I mean, the crowd starts shouting, "Afters, we want 7." Yeah. Immediately. But you are thinking, and it's probably the only time I've ever thought this in an Old Firm game with us, with half an hour to go, they're done. And this is them done for the season, actually. This is why they're so far back. This busts them. And you think, we could really run up because everybody is flying. You can see it. And I watched the game again. It was weird. The number of times Butcher or Goff are actually, not at a corner, but are bursting through 30, 40 yards from goal. We're full of energy. Is playing sensational. And they're all over the place. I mean, they're making tactical switches They bring on White, they put him to left back, and they push Anton Rogan into midfield.
Dear me.
And
To face Walters.
Yeah, I mean, it is like, what? But you watch us, and the crowd don't believe it. There's a genuine buzz. The ball boy behind that, at the Coatland behind the goal is sensational.
Mm-hmm.
And it just is one of those, 29 minutes to go, 61 minutes in the clock, 62, when the fifth goes in. And you think, we can really do this. Look, this could be as many as we want, because they're done. They are literally, they're not even putting in bad tackles. They're just, everything's gone from them. It is weird, and we're flying in a way which be interesting to see what you two. I don't think I've ever seen us be like at that score, close to, with half an hour to go. It is a sensational performance. It's one of the best second half, or 15 minutes of the second half, I think I've ever seen, because you just take it away from them. Nobody can believe it. 4-1 is like, oof. 5-1 is like, what is going on here? I haven't seen Rangers score 5 since in my life.
Andy, you're younger. I mean, what are you thinking here? This is just, it's something none of us have seen.
It's dreamland. Absolute dreamland. I'm 12-year-old, man. I can't believe it. The scoreboards were still a relative novelty then, and looking up at it, and it was, I don't know, was it 57 minutes or something? We scored the fourth or the fifth, I can't remember, but I remember, as John says, there was so much left of the game that you're like, we're going to soak this in, and we want to scud your arse, and that's why they were shouting, we want 5, we want 6, we want 7, and then obviously Souness comes on and does his bit and kills that dream soon. But as a 12-year-old, as a 12-year-old, this is beyond your wildest dreams. I'm dying to get home and get the strip on and get the ball out and reenact this.
I mean, Souness is blamed. I mean, Brown, Durant, McCoist, Ian Ferguson, somehow furious after a 5-1 demolition at Souness for coming on and humiliating them in I guess a different way. It's not running up a cricket score, it's keeping the ball, spraying it about, rubbing their noses in it, but the Celtic players are panicking. It can't get 7, it can't get to 7, and Souness doesn't care. He's not been brought up in that thing. That 7-1 doesn't mean a thing to him. But yeah, there was a wee bit of consternation after that. I felt I was to blame. I got out of hospital after a hernia operation. I was 7 on the Friday, and was sat up in or on my parents' bed listening to the radio. Of course, last 5 minutes of the first half, second half live. And you would also get the scores as they came in, and I kept, for whatever reason, going down the stairs to tell my mum that's 2-1, 3-1, it's 4-1, and then when it got to 5-1, I said, this is too sore to just keep coming down to tell you the score. I'm going to come down and put the headphones on and listen to it in the big radio in the living room. Of course, the action stopped. It's that leaving the living room with a boring 0-0 to make a cup of tea, and there's a goal kind of thing. The wait for me for that 24 hours until Scott Sport on the Sunday to actually see any of this was interminable. I just wanted to soak it all in, but when it came, it was huge.
You sound like my mother. She was up the town, and this is a classic story in my family. She came back. She went in the video shop at 4:45 at the foot of the road with my sister, and she went up. And she didn't know who the guy was, obviously. She knew him and talked to him, but didn't know he was a blue nose. And he's obviously desperate. And he goes, some result today. And she goes, what? He said, the Old Firm. She went, what was it? She went, he went 5-1. And she went, oh, Graham, how could you let them do it to us? and she went, who to? And she went, he went, Rangers 1-5. I think the guy had lit the counter at this point. At which point my sister lifts her, carries her out the shop, and takes her up the street till she does it. And she gave my dad pelters because he came in with the paper and he said, right, is it on the night? He went, looked at back even. He says, no, it's tomorrow. And he was like, no. She was furious the game was not on the Saturday. And she didn't. The house was cleaned the next day to make sure everything was perfect because the nervous energy was And then Scott Sport came on, and that was it, cup of tea, and she was kicking every ball. But it just...
Because you had to wait, because Sports Scene on a Saturday night was on at 10 o'clock, 10:30.
Yes.
And so you're waiting up, I didn't know, and it's Aberdeen, Dundee United, come on. Now, in those days, they showed their game, which was proper highlights in those days. We've talked about this on the show before. And then you have three other very quick highlights, the goals really from three other games, and then it would be the Scott Sport would have the other game the following day. And I'm sitting there as a naive 7-year-old, so maybe they'll show the goals and the wee roundup they do at the end, which of course they wouldn't because Scott Sport had the rights. Oh, it was horrible. But when it came. And there was a wee treat for Scott Sport viewers because Tommy Burns was interviewed, seemingly from his living room, to apologise. Incredible. I followed it up in the press as saying, in all my years with Celtic, I've never been involved in anything so humiliating. However, it won't happen again. Of course it would, and we'll get to that in due course. The result was a strong signal, and the media reaction on the Monday, I think, finally grasped it. This 2-year period of adjustment was over. Rangers players who weren't dyed in the wool, they knew enough about what was required, and now they could kind of power on with their demonstration of their quality. Celtic were shell-shocked by this. They lost 3 out of the next 5 league games, crashed out the Skull League Cup. Rangers, this is week 3 of the Premier League. They went top of the Scottish Premier Division that afternoon and would not move from that spot for the entirety of the season. Skull League Cup, boys, the familiar early season cruise, 13 goals in 3 rounds. Well, let's talk about Europe. UEFA Cup. Again, we are behind the Iron Curtain to Poland. 4th draw in a row to place Katowice. First round opponents. First leg at Ibrox. John, a bit of a scrappy affair. Rangers won 1-0. Maybe fortunate to get that. Walters got the second half goal, but the Poles could easily have been ahead before half time. Gary Stevens had to clear off the goal line on one occasion. A little sign of those old frustrations and ill-discipline. John Brown given a ban for throwing a Polish physio's medical bag off the pitch, all the contents spilling out. And then the second leg, that concentration, familiar, was becoming endemic. Rangers 1 down within 4 minutes. Chris Wood slipped when trying to dive to stop a free kick. And you must have been thinking, well, here we go, this is the Rangers story in Europe. However, it was from then on almost the perfect European performance, guys. Butcher with a couple of headers. The Poles equalised on the night, but there was no Rangers retreat. Ian Durrant, Ian Ferguson scored 2 more to put the game well out of sight. A 4-2 away win. John, as I said, signs of the old, but maybe signs of the kind of modern European approach, especially away from home, that we've been demanding.
Yeah, well, even at home, we don't lose a goal, which, we have been guilty of. And we weren't great at Ibrox. I mean, considering how good the domestic form was, it wasn't up there with what was happening. But you go away and, I don't know, I felt by this point 1-0 is a decent result in Europe because we didn't always score away from home, but generally we made chances, and therefore there was a chance that we would score away from home, which means they would probably need to score 3 to get through. So I think it just gives a reassurance that this is you get to a point, because our European performances, by and large, for these 3 seasons, when we go out, it's not because we get a 3-0 pasting somewhere or whatever. It's we could have done better, but there's no humiliations. And when you go to Katowice, anywhere, Eastern Europe, whatever, it's not like playing League Ireland team or whatever, and you go away and you win 4-2 playing football, after losing a goal in the first 5 minutes, and you just say, okay, we've lost a goal, it's leveling argument, and then the next 85 minutes you win 4-1. It gives you confidence, a belief that we're gonna crack this European thing. I don't necessarily mean we'll win a European trophy, but we're going to go quarters again, semis, whatever, because we do seem to be and this is probably the high point around now, we do seem to understand Europe at this point. We aren't getting easy draws, we aren't getting hellish ones, generally. But we know how to work our way through it. And we've got an experienced team. I mean, Gary Stevens, he must have a Cup Winners' Cup medal. Butcher's got the UEFA Cup.
Yeah.
Souness, I mean, there is experience of winning. Goff's been to the European Cup semi-final. So there is experience and there is an expectation that we're going to go places. And winning 4-2 away, it's a cracking result. However you dress it up, it is a cracking result. Unless you're playing, even now, if you went to Gibraltar and beat somebody 4-2, you'd say that was a decent result.
Yeah, it's different. It was a departure, wasn't it? Andy, from the kind of 4-5-1 smothering job that Souness had tried in Kiev and Bucharest, even the last trip to Poland to just protect that 3-1 victory over Gornik. There was an ability and a willingness to be a bit more adventurous that night.
Poland still had a fairly, in fact, more than fairly good reputation in world football at that point. They were regarded as a good football nation. Still part of the Eastern Bloc. I suppose that was part of the kind of mysticism, but it was unusual for us to go away from home and score 4 goals in Europe. That was the bottom line. So just as we're saying, it was unusual for us to beat Celtic 5-1. It was unusual for this as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think this was ever on TV in any way, shape or form. I remember listening to it on the radio and I can't recall ever seeing any of the goals.
Oh no, the goals are there. It was on Sports Night.
Goals are there somewhere.
Yeah, so on Sports Night on a Wednesday night, but it certainly wasn't live for sure. You would have had to have listened through basically a telephone line back to Blighty.
Richard Park or something. Yeah.
I've seen there's my YouTube research.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's not a bad performance at all. There's some famous games, of course. We've talked about one of the most famous. I would go and have a look at that. If any listeners have not yet gone and looked at the Gornik game at home the previous season, that is one of the best first halves I've seen from a Rangers team in Europe. It's absolutely exceptional stuff. So there's something building, perhaps. Well, it looks like there's something building in terms of our European competence. I think that'll do us for this evening. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to discuss Rangers with you. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Martyn. Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks to you both, and apologies to the listeners. It wasn't the 7-hour special. The editor's cutting it short.
Well, we'll release that. We'll release that another day. In that night in Poland, Souness felt the 2 final goals by Durrant and Ian Ferguson were fitting because I thought they were the best players on the park. For Durrant especially, it was just another step on an upward career trajectory that was reaching for the stars. Besides Cooper, he was the most natural creative force in the Rangers team and was the obvious heir to his role as the homegrown genius who loved the club as much as the sport itself. In a game where simply wanting it isn't enough, the resonance of players who can match supreme talent with an instinctive appreciation for those who pay to watch is incalculable. Davy Cooper made a rare start alongside Durrant in Poland that night. The two men would never line up for Rangers again. Until next time, bye for now.